I've long considered Pierre Gimonnet et champagnes to be the reference point for high-quality Blanc de Blanc in the Champagne region. Their racy, pure and mineral style reflects the highest levels of finesse and freshness that is emblematic of Chardonnay grapes grown on the white, chalky slopes of the Côte de Blanc. Didier Gimonnet and his brother Olivier are at the helm of the family's domain. These days, they are accompanied by the involvement of their respective children. Didier is one of Champagne's great wine growers and makers, who is also, and uncommonly, a good communicator. I sat down with him recently to talk about his philosophy and passion for making some of the finest Blanc de Blanc in Champagne. Didier, welcome. It's wonderful to have you with us today. You and your family are custodians to a remarkable 30 hectares of vineyards in the Côte de Blanc. 90% of your holdings are in the north and around 10% in the south. And so much of what I love about your style is about that northerly aspect, which is a decidedly fresher style of Chardonnay that you're producing. So can you please describe to us from your perspective what this profile really is from the north and also the north versus the south?
Yes, of course. Yes, it's true that to me, it's very important to see a difference between the north and the south. In fact, my main problem, I have 90% of my vineyards located in the north and only 10% in the south. But I think I have a good knowledge because I taste a lot of wines from other friends or other growers, so I know quite good. For me, there is the main difference, it is the wine profile, but in fact, it's due to many things. Firstly, it is the exposure. In the north, we are often planted on east-facing slope. That means we have generally sun in the morning, but it's really fresh. And it is, in fact, with that, we have less impact than in the south, where in the south, it's more a southwest exposure. So when it is like this, that means we have a longer cycle for the ripeness. And this is very important, specifically with the global warming, who changed a lot of the cycle since 40 years. But I will tell you after. So because of this climate influence, we have slightly cooler overall in the north of Côte de Blanc. So that means the wine, for me, the profile, you have wines with more elegance, with more finesse. I know it's not politically correct, but I like to see it's more feminine.
Mm-hmm.
In the south, it's a little bit more austere. It's more masculine. In fact, you have more body, and the minerality is a little bit different because also of the typicity of the soil. In the north, it is very pure chalk with a lot of belemnite.
Mm-hmm.
And in the south, it looks like the same, but I think you have a little bit less topsoil and you have a little bit more clay.
Mm.
But of course, after you have differences between different villages, and you can compare exactly, for example, Avis, Cramant, and Chouilly in the north, and Auger and Le Mesnil in the south. And for example, but I think we will tell after, we have not the same topsoil than other villages in Côte de Blanc. Yeah. So in summary, north is very elegant with a lot of finesse. The chalkiness is, for me, a little bit more gentle. That means you have a very creamy texture, and it is really the identity, for example, of Cramant. Cramant is really the top version of this very creamy chalkiness. And in the south, it's a little bit more austere on the profile. The minerality is something with tension, very, for me, smoky and graphite.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think texture is a really important part of the profile of these villages. It's not just about freshness. There's also that textural element that comes through, and I always pick that up versus, with the different village interpretations of what they're producing. It's really, really interesting. Cuy, of course, is at the center of your domain and your non-vintage style in particular. So that particular village faces north to northwest, producing a very fresh and more angular style of Chardonnay. It's very distinctive in your cuvées. So can you profile specifically the village of Cuy and how this contributes to your particular style that you're producing?
Yes. In fact, Cuy is always associated to Gimonnet.
Yeah.
In fact, it's very true that people consider us as expert for the village of Cuy because, in fact, we have 15 hectares. So 15 hectares is very important. Cuy is a northern village of Côte de Blanc. After, it is very different from the other because most of the orientation is northwest facing slope.
Mm.
And after, as I tried to tell you before, in fact, there is you have chalk, of course, but not everywhere in the village. And when you are on the highest slope, in fact, you have a large part of clay on the topsoil. That means generally it's a little bit more difficult to have a good maturing. You need time for cuit. In fact, it is the most problematic of cuit. You need time. Historically, it was very difficult. Currently, it's easier because blooming period is earlier. And so, of course, because of this situation, wines are very acidic. You know, generally, I like to tell you that Chardonnay is more acidic than Pinot Noir and Pinot Meunier. Côte des Blancs is more acidic and mineral than other area in Champagne. And Cuit is the most acidic village of Champagne. So the vineyards of Gimonnet is one of the most acidic of Champagne. Mm. So we need to be enough clever to manage this situation. So in fact, generally, the style of Cuit, you have not the concentration of Grand Cru villages, of course. It's lighter than the other, but you have always a lot of salinity in length because it is pretty acidic. For us, it's a power because it's very easy, not so easy, but it is a style we expect for non-vintage cuvée. Champagne is for drinking. So if you have a wine very salivating, it's well done to do that. When people tell Cuit is the signature of Gimonnet, in fact, it's really interesting because you need to understand with such volumes, that's been 50% of our vines located in this village. It's a very important component. So since the beginning, Cuit was always the village to elaborate the non-vintage cuvée. And I think it's very well adapted. We have a very good knowledge how to obtain this. But after, and it's part of the style of Gimonnet, and it is part of our philosophy of blending, Cuit is always a very interesting component to add freshness and more delicate wine to the Grand Cru, which have more elegance and more power. So it is a signature of Gimonnet because the freshness you have always in the legs of Gimonnet is due to this part of Cuit.
Yeah. It's a fantastic tool, I think, to use in a non-vintage blend, as you just mentioned. And that's how a lot of producers tend to use Cuit is in a blend, such as a non-vintage, because as a standalone expression, it can be very difficult to achieve something that's drinkable, as you've alluded to just then. However, in the changing face of climate change, I guess, and very recently, you released for the first time a special Club Prestige cuvée from your Cuit parcel, Croix Blanche, which has around 4.5 hectares behind your house. It comes from the 2018 vintage, which was a particularly good year, a warm year in Champagne. You say that this vintage made a single cru expression possible from Cuit. So very unusual to see something like that. So can you please explain how you see this expression of Cuit possibly changing into the future? You said before about, struggling for ripeness and always being difficult to manage, but you bring the expertise to enable that to happen. How do you see Cuit changing into the future? Is it going to be a little easier, for example, for you to get a riper expression out of the fruit?
Yes, I would like to tell you something very important to understand, in fact, the evolution of the climate. When I arrived on the domain, so on the 80s, so quite a long time ago, my father explained me when you have 9 to 9.5 of alcohol in Cuit, it's normal. When you have 10, it's a very good year. When you have 10.5, it is an exceptional year. Currently, for me, it's very more easy to obtain 11, generally 6 or 7 years on 10. So the change is incredible. In fact, I like statistics, and I would like to tell you something. My father, when I was a child, my father harvested mostly 1 year on 2 in October. Since I am in the domain, I start only 3 times in October, in 87, 91, and 2013. Mm-hmm. My father harvested only once in August. It was in 1976. Since 2003, we start 6 times in August. So it is really, really incredible to see such an evolution in only 40 years. Currently, I harvest 23 days before my father in average.
Wow.
With 1.5 more of alcohol. So you see the evolution is really crazy. So I don't want to imagine what it will be in 40 years. I think we need to, it needs to stop. But for the moment, it's very interesting for us, specifically for the vineyards of Cuit. The most important detail you need to understand. 40 years ago, when my father explained we harvest mostly at 9.5, he told me the truth is to harvest with 9.5 to 10 of alcohol and with 7 of acidity. And I thought it was the truth. But in fact, it is not the truth. Because at this period, it was the truth because they harvest mostly at the end of September. Mm-hmm. And when you were at the end of September at this period, it could be very wet. So they had a lot of problematic with botrytis. So the challenge was always to say, okay, do we prefer to harvest with more ripeness or do you prefer to harvest with less botrytis? Mm-hmm. But after there is something very, very important to understand. At this period, when they harvest at the end of September, even if the grapes obtain only 9.5 or 10 of alcohol, you had a cycle between blooming and harvest of 100 days. That means they add the aromatic ripeness, the phenolic ripeness. Currently, specifically on the last decade, when we obtain 10.5 of 11, we had short cycle. For example, in 19 or 20, we obtain 11 after only 82, 85 days. With that, you didn't obtain the ripeness. That means we have changed completely our criteria to determine the harvesting date. Currently, the criteria are more the color of skin, maturity of pips, tasting of berries, and of course, we try to have the aromatic ripeness. And by knowledge and by experiment, in fact, I missed the vintage, the first vintages like this as 7 and 11. Mm-hmm. I didn't understand this, but in fact, we need to have a minimum of 92 days because the plants needs time to reach the elements who are going to give you the minerality. Mm. So now we have the choice. Every grower can choose the date. And now if you are in the vineyards, you can see on the same village, you have people who are harvesting during 10 days between the first one and the other. Mm. That means it's only a question of what you decide. And it is really where I try to work a lot, and the new generation will work a lot about this evolution. In fact, we try to have this aromatic ripeness. We need to harvest later than the other. Because a terroir is not only a soil and a climate, the terroir is a soil, climate, and people. And every grower or every house have his own truth. Our truth is to have a lot of purity and elaborating without wood, without oak. So we need to have the perfect fruit. So for Cuit, it is really why we elaborate 100% special club Cuit from 2018, because 2018 was very easy vintage. Imagine we have generous yield, we have a very sunny and dry summer, and we can start the harvest on the 1st of September with 11 of alcohol, but you have the possibility to wait. And for certain specific lieux-dits of Cuit, which have generous yield, we decide to wait. And we harvest 12 days later than the other on some plots of Cuit. And we obtain something we never imagined in Cuit. In fact, we keep this freshness, we keep the identity of Cuit, but with more power for Cuit. And because of generous yield, 18 is not to concentrate. In fact, it's balance, but you have incredible buvability. And it is why we decide to elaborate 100% Cuit.
It's an incredible champagne and such a privilege to taste something from Cuit so exclusively. And I remember when I tasted it for the first time here at your domain with some other people, and we were blown away by the purity that actually came through. It was like looking through a window. It was so clear. It was so beautiful. It wasn't at all heavy, concentrated. We had a little bit more volume, as you say, that you would normally expect from Cui, but it's just that I think platform that Cui stands on, which is always so much more elevated from a freshness point of view, was really beautifully supporting the bigger fruit, I guess, expression that was coming through. Yeah. So it was really incredible.
That's true, and it is while Cui could be interesting because in fact you can increase aromatic ripeness, but Cui will be never extravagant. In fact, you will not have you will never have too much concentration. Cui is not a Grand Cru. It is why in the future, for me, there is no chance that Cui begin to be a Grand Cru because you have not the soil to do this.
The character of a Grand Cru.
The soil, it's a question of chalkiness, it's a question of drainage, it's a question of many things. And in fact, we have not this quality. Yeah. But if you are the knowledge to understand this terroir, you can produce, in fact, very interesting wine. But the main difference with Cui and Cremant, in Cui, you can drink by buckets. But in Cremant, for me, it's deeper. You have more complexity. Yeah. You have more elegance, and I'm not going to tell you it's more for intellectual people, but it's a little bit like this. Cui is very affordable for many people.
Yeah, it's very easy to drink, very pleasant. Just as a side note, because you touched on it a little bit, and I always find it very interesting to hear different people's interpretation. When it comes to acidity versus minerality, how would you describe the expression in your mouth, on the palate? The two different expressions.
In fact, in Côte des Blancs, we always say Chardonnay are praised because they are acidic. In fact, it's not that. It's because they are mineral.
Yeah.
The main difference between acidity and minerality, it's always the same. It's a question of texture and it's a question of balance. Acidic wines are not good if you have the perception of acidity. Acidity, for me, it's more herbaceous. The real definition of acidity is no good. That means it's a little bit aggressive.
Yeah.
And in fact, you need to make the difference between acidity, the impact you have on the wine if you are able to manage the acidity. If you manage the acidity correctly, in fact, it is more freshness. And minerality, in fact, people have the perception it's a little bit acidic, but in fact, it is not acidic. It is a specific texture you have in the mouth. So it's very difficult to employ the good words.
I know.
Because in fact, the consumer expects something. He understands the word acidity.
Yeah.
That means it is a little bit, he climbs the papillas, but you have more difficulty to imagine what is minerality because you have many interpretation of minerality.
Exactly.
And the minerality, for example, the minerality of the north and the south of Côte des Blancs is so different.
Yeah. I always feel that the acidity actually supports the expression of the minerality.
Yeah.
It pushes it far and also in length as well. Yeah. So.
And after, I would like precise something because it is something I have understand in the last decade. Acidity depends of the vintage. pH depends from the minerality or depends from elements we don't know very well. It would be calcium, potassium, many different elements. And pH depends from the terroir. You know, I always would like to harvest later than the other because I elaborate the vinification in stainless tank.
Yeah.
Acidity is always declining, but the pH is always the same. For example, for the vintage 19, we obtain 11 of alcohol after only 82 days. And I would like to wait. And we wait about between a week and 10 days. And we harvest the vintage 2019 at a level of alcohol we never had before, except for, I think, in 59, but I was not alive at this time.
When in charge back then.
We harvest all the Grand Cru at an average of 12 of alcohol. It could be crazy. We had lower acidity than generally because it was only 5 to 6 of acidity. Many people consider it was too low. And in fact, if you taste the wines, you don't see there is low acidity because the pH is increasing with the cycle because the plant reach the elements to give you the minerality. So it is why I'm not afraid by wine with lower acidity because it's a question of pH. My main problem is the level of alcohol, and it will be a challenge for the new generation to be enough inventive to find a new viticulture to have wines with always some acidity, but with lower level of alcohol.
Mm.
And the truth is to increase the cycle, in fact.
Mm.
So how to increase the cycle? We have some idea, but it will be not so easy.
Yeah, okay. So despite the very rare exceptions like the Special Club Cui that we just spoke about, you have been quite outspoken about the DNA of Champagne. You are unapologetically pro-blend and anti-mono-terroir in general. It's an affirmation that goes to the heart and soul of Champagne as a wine, historically from disparate terroirs to balance concentration with finesse and elegance. Your own bottles, your own bottlings emulate this idea. We did touch on it before about the blend and how important that is. So can you describe why you are so emphatic about this philosophy, and how do you personally balance that idea of concentration with finesse?
Yeah. In fact, I am impact, yes, always the same. People are very important to create a style of a company. So everybody have his own interpretation of terroir, of course. Historically, if blending is so important in Champagne, it is because we are in a northern area and we have a lot of diversity of terroir. So to obtain something always with a lot of harmony, it's better to blend them together and to don't have the bad vintages or to have less influence with the less noble terroir. I'm always strange because I have no dogma, in fact, but I think some things and I can do the opposite. So that means when you have a rule, you have always exception. But personally, it's very important. The blending is very important because you adjust terroir together. And for me, who is located in Côte des Blancs, I don't want to have a range of Grand Cru villages because we have 13 hectares and a range of Premier Cru because we have 17 hectares. I would like to have the DNA of Gimonnet. And the DNA of Gimonnet is to adjust the elegance and the depth of Cramant, the fruitiness and the chalkiness of Chouilly, the exotism of Vertu or Auger, and the freshness of Cuit. And if you adjust all them together, you have a specific style you can recognize. When you have a small company, your objective is not to imitate the brands, but to have your own identity. And I think blending is part of the identity of Gimonnet. After, to explain the single terroir, it's very trendy because currently you have a lot of young growers who have studied in Burgundy, and it's easier to have a telling story by speaking about single plot and villages than a brand. But you need to imagine that Champagne is in priority a non-vintage. Champagne is for celebration, is for drinking. And 90% of the production of Champagne is non-vintage cuvée. Mm-hmm. And after you have the premium cuvée. Mm. If you decide that the premium cuvée are single plot or single village, that means you take the best for this. And in fact, you destroy the blend because you take the best component only for the premium cuvée and not for the blend. And it is my theory. Every year, we elaborate wine plot par plot. So with 30 hectares, we have 40 different plots. My priority in spring is to elaborate the non-vintage cuvée. So we taste all the tanks and we take all we need to have very good level for the non-vintage cuvée. After you can play. To elaborate premium or cuvée, it's a children game because you select the best plots and the best vintages. For the other, it's not the same. So it's good to explain this to see the impact of single terroir or single plot on blend. Gimonnet is always associated to Cuit, but in fact, the power of Gimonnet is Cramant because we have 6 hectares of Cramant. Mm. Most of them are located in the heart of terroir, in very good lieux-dits, Le Bateau, Les Buissons, Les Gros Monts, etc. We have exclusively all vines. The average age in Cramant is 6 hectares. So we have, with 6 hectares in Cramant, we have an opportunity to have about 400 hectolitres per year of Cramant. Mm-hmm. If I decide to don't produce exclusively a single Cramant, it's because these 400 hectolitres are very important to increase the level of the range.
Mm. The quality, you mean, of the range?
Yeah. So if you look at our range, you have the Gastronome, you have the Rosé, Gastronome, Floron, Enophile, Special Club, etc. I take only 10% of my best juices from Cramant to elaborate a mono village, a single village Cramant. but the 90 other percent are dispatched in the others. You have 60% in the special club, 40 in Fleuron and Onophile, 20 in Gastronome and Rosé. And if you have such a level for the range, it is because we take the best plots to include it in all of them. After you have a blend, it's always like this. The wine is more complete and you have more complexity. But of course, you need to blend only the best component.
Yeah.
It is the truth of a blend. If you use only best component, it's very good. When you have single plot or single terroir, in fact, you have not the DNA of the brand, but you have more unique expression of a specific terroir. It could be something considered more pure or more authentic. That's true. But I think you have more complexity and more aging potential with blend.
Yeah, it's a really interesting concept. And I remember you explaining it to me a few years ago, and I hadn't ever heard anybody speak in those terms before. It almost seems to be reverse engineering the idea. You were talking about specifically Cremant and these two older plots that you have, Buisson and Le Bateau, planted or predating World War I. And they're incredible old vines. I've been there myself and I see the very small yields that they produce, the tiny berries, the incredible fruit. But you did make a point to me saying that as beautiful as these wines can be from these old vines, you don't consider it to be typical for Cremant. And that's why you like to take, just a tiny amount of the wines that they produce and populate some of your other wines with that, because just a few percent can make all the difference to the ultimate expression of some of your other champagnes, which is extraordinary. Just a few percent. Most people wouldn't actually think that would contribute much at all. But in your world, it does create a massive world of difference. So it's a really beautiful way, I think, of thinking of it, because it's these are very, specific plots from an area in Champagne, and it's not typical for that crew though to produce something as incredibly mature as those particular vineyards do.
Yeah.
So yeah, incredible.
And what is incredible, in fact, you understood that blending is the truth for me.
Yeah.
And generally, I consider, for example, for the special club, the blend is the truth. The blend Grand Terroir is the truth. But in fact, I have only one exception. It is Cremant. I always consider Cremant could be more complex and at an higher level than the blend. But it's because it's Cremant. If you understand that Cremant is dispatched in all the cuvées of Gimonnet, and with the 100% Cremant, you have only the blend of the best of Gimonnet, it could be the truth to say, okay, you could have exception. But the main problem, the exception must not destroy the range. That means for me, it's completely crazy to take the best and to exclude the best from all the other vintages. When you talk about Le Bateau and Les Buissons planted in 1911, etc., can you imagine that you have always piece of these plots in the rosé non-vintage? In fact, we keep only 2 or 3 or 5% of this to increase something on entry-level cuvée.
Yeah.
But it's very important.
Yeah.
That make all the difference.
Yeah. No, it's incredible tool that you have. So Gimonnet, along with Bollinger, are known for maintaining a percentage of reserve wines in Magnum. Yours are held under Crown Seal. It's a crazy idea and an expensive one as well, but it does impart something quite special into your wine. So can you talk us through why you decided to do this and what quality is it bringing to your ultimate expression?
There are 2 reasons to have done this. Firstly, at the beginning, it's a response to the abundant vintages 82 and 83. In fact, when the harvest 83 arrived, the winery was not empty. So my father needs to put the wines in something. So he put all the wines in bottles with 5 grams of sugar and yeast. So at the beginning, it was not a rational decision. But in fact, after when he see the difference between wines in bottles and in tanks, he said, wow, it's crazy. After, you need to imagine something. Normally, an entry level for a brand, it's a blend between Pinot Noir, Pinot Meunier, and Chardonnay. Here, we have something completely crazy to do. We need to elaborate a non-vintage cuvée who must be drinkable with not a long aging. And we need to elaborate this only exclusively from Premier Cru Chardonnay of Côte des Blancs. So with something very mineral and very acidic. So we need to be more inventive than the other. And this process of keeping the reserve wines in bottle is the truth. Because in fact, the evolution of the wine is completely different. When you put the wines in bottles for a small fermentation with 5 grams of sugar, in fact, you have the phenomenon of autolysis. So you have a better evolution than in tank. You have less oxidation because it is under carbonic gas. So you have a better evolution and you have more maturation given by the autolysis. And at the beginning, it seems to be crazy, but it is the best solution we find to produce blanc de blanc non-vintage with a lot of buvability. In fact, when you blend the wine from basis year. So generally, wine from the last harvest is very fresh with orchard flavors, with lemons, apple, pear, etc. And reserve wines are more toasty. So when you blend them together, and if you keep on these only between 2 and 3 years, it is still mature because you had the autolysis before. And you have, in fact, a wine with good attack, who climb the papillas. You have a lot of, it is very fresh and crispy in length, but in the middle, it's not aggressive. You have always this gentle texture given by the north of Côte des Blancs plus the reserve wines. So it is why it is, at the beginning, it was an opportunity. Now it's an evidence for us. It is really the best way to do this for our own vintage. After, I would like to precise, of course, you told it's very rare in Champagne. Only few houses do this, but we are very proud because you are the unique houses who keep all the reserve wines in bottles under glass. Now, when we start, it was in 82. So we have more than 40 years of knowledge about this. So the process is completely understood. And now I have a collection of reserve wines. That means now I know exactly how to manage this. In fact, it's the opposite of Solera or Perpetuel because all vintages are kept vintage par vintage. And par vintage, I have 2 or 3 cuvées. I have 1 cuvée of the best component of the non-vintage. And I have what I call medicine wine, but the new generation is tell identitary wine. It's more poetic and it's... our wines are not ill. But I think it's always, for example, one single plots, for example, Leroy from Cuy or Croix Blanche from Cuy, who have a huge identity. So when you elaborate the blend, I have a collection on 10 years. In fact, I blend different non-vintage together and I support and I manage with medicine wine to obtain always the same taste.
And how far back do your reserve wines go? What year?
Yeah.
What year did your reserve wines? Yeah,
currently it's the oldest is 14.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Yeah. It's always about 10 years. For example, the non-vintage we currently sell, the basis is 22 and the oldest wine is from 10.
So you're getting a really nice, I guess, level of maturity from like a toasty reduction. And that sort of texture that you're talking about from the autolysis is always so nice and light, and that's really important to your style as well. And because you don't believe in the stirring of the lees, do you? You know, in the winemaking process, so you don't really want to weigh the wine down with, batonnage and.
That depends if it is in tank or in bottles. In bottles, it's very important to give the...
No, in tank I'm talking about.
Tank,
no. Because you don't want to weigh down the wine in that regard. And you're getting lovely texture from the magnums. So you and your brother, Olivier, you've been at the helm of the Gimonnet domain now for many, many years. And things are starting to change, though. More and more, you're introducing your children into the business. They're very hands-on now. We had Arnaud, obviously, in Australia not too long ago, doing a role that you used to do, lots of traveling and talking to people. So it's fantastic to see that transition happening. So what ideas do you think your kids are bringing to the business? Are they bringing something that's interesting, that's thought-provoking to you, or maybe even challenging for you?
I think it's very important, but the main difference between our domain and the other domain the new generation will not change completely the styles, and they are not in opposition with our generation for one reason. In fact, our domain was precursor since 40 or 50 years in many domains. As you know, we are precursor because my father burned the barrels in 1955, invest in stainless tanks, and he starts a definition of very precise wines in stainless tank plot. After, he was precursor by inventing the keeping of reserve wines in bottles in 82. After, currently, I'm against the ideology of no dosage or low dosage, but I was precursor because I was the first grower to put a brut nature in the market in 1985, only because it is the truth of natural harmony. And we are precursor in many, many domains. And I think we put the domain at a level who is not so bad for our generation. So because of this, when they arrive, they say, wow, it's not so bad. The precedent generation have done a lot of things, specifically, for example, for the about the age of the vineyards. We have a very old vineyards currently because we preserve these vineyards during our generation because we consider it was the truth to have the minerality. So when they arrive, they say, yes, it's the bases are not so bad. After, they will have, of course, evolution because the climate is changing, and I think they need to be in phases with the societal evolution, with the climatic evolution, with the environmental evolution. And in fact, they are very rational and rigorous because for the moment you have two of the new generation, my son and my nephew. Certainly in the future, in less than 1 year, I will have another son who will arrive on the company. And they have all agronomy education because they are all engineer in agronomy. They are all enologists. They have work outside before to be there. Arnaud was consultant, for example, during 10 years. Pierre Guillaume traveled during 2 years and a half in other country to make vinification in other country. In fact, very sincerely, they are more open than our generation. Because of the generation, they travel a lot. After, they have more, I don't know the term in English, environmental sensibility. So, of course, they would like to be more precise about the environmental evolution of the domain. Currently, we are sustainable. We have a sustainable viticulture with no herbicide, with no insecticide, etc. They would like to be a little bit more
progressive. Do you mean? Or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But always.
With certification, you mean? Or?
No.
No.
They have the certification, but for example, we are always talking about organic or biodynamic or something like this. But at Gimonnet, we are pragmatic and we are not ayatollah of unique thinking. We have some plots in the philosophy of organic with no certification, but we really understand what are the limits of organic viticulture. And if we have no certification, or if we are not organic growers, it's because we are too honest. That means we know the limit, and we would like to keep our specificity of growers. We don't buy any grapes, and we don't want to have another activity of negociant to complete no volumes or to produce more. You will understand our philosophy is to have a styles given by our terroir, but with our own sensibility. And to do what we would like, that means purity, elegance, freshness, with no add of making, of make-off? No, maquillage. No have of makeup.
Yes, okay.
Given by oak, etc. In fact, we need to have a perfect fruit.
Yes.
And for this, we need to be very precise about the harvesting date. And it is possible only if you are a grower. So it is why we are pragmatical. we know the limit of organic, but they would like to be more precise. For example, Arnaud is implanting some, I don't know if the term is vegetables during winter for the structure of the soil or something like this. So
You're experimenting.
Yeah, we will do a lot of experiment about this new challenge. More idea about the technology you could have. It could be robot in the vineyards. It could be robot in the cellars or something like this. There, of course, I think it's more from their generation.
Of course.
But what they would like, in fact, they would like to preserve our styles, but I think with more boldness and responsibility.
Pragmatism and maybe a little bit more refinement around processes and that sort of thing. So it's very interesting. So lastly, Didier, I would like to know from you, what are some of the best memories that you've had with some of your great champagnes? What made them so good, or what was the occasion that made them so memorable?
Yes, it's a strange question because it's not a strange question. But if I tell you that my best memory with champagne was not from Gimonnet,
that's okay as well. You can tell me.
So this means I could be open. I think a good cœur.
Yeah.
In fact, it's always an incredible wine with a specific occasion.
Okay.
Of course, I have a lot of good memories with Gimonnet, specifically with the vintage of 79 or 82. But my best memory about champagne, it was Vieille Vigne Française, 1919.
Ah, okay.
Firstly, because it was a Vieille Vigne Française and it was the only Vieille Vigne Française I tasted during my life.
Yeah.
But it was the last glass of champagne I tasted with my father before he died. And in fact, I don't know, he was going to die on Monday, but on the Friday before, we have a specific occasion. And, I don't know why I said to my father, okay, we have a bottle of Vieille Vigne. I think it's a good occasion to taste and to see that. And I was impressed by Vieille Vigne Française because I consider it was not a Bollinger. It was a grower champagne style.
Well, it essentially is, to be honest.
Yeah, it was a grower champagne style with a lot of purity, a lot of finesse, a lot of elegance, and many things. I think for me, it was an incredible bottle. And after, it was the last bottle with my father. So it is a very good memory.
And your father appreciated the champagne as well. Yeah.
Yes, of course.
I always think with the Vieille Vigne Française, it's an incredible paradoxical champagne. There's always so much concentration and power, but it is light as a feather. It is so light. It's beautiful fruit. Yeah. Incredible.
It's incredible. I suppose it was because it was the engraft roots.
Yeah.
Who give you the essence of terroir.
Yeah, of course.
But when I taste, I say, wow, it's a grower champagne.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Didier, it's just been wonderful to spend some time with you and to give people the deeper understanding behind your incredible range of champagnes. They are extraordinary. And I always say to people when they ask me about my idea or suggestions, I always think that Pierre Gimonnet fish champagnes are a great reference point for really typical Blanc de Blanc from the Côte de Blanc. It sets a very high benchmark for what the standard of these champagnes should be. So I just want to say thank you for all your hard work. We appreciate it because it's absolutely delicious, great champagnes. And we thank you for your time.
Thank you, Sarah.
Vine & Bubble is a boutique and independent information source dedicated exclusively to telling the real story of champagne. It was launched by me, Sarah Underdown, in November 2018 after almost a decade of working in the champagne industry as a recognised writer, educator and presenter. Vine & Bubble brings together a network of Australian wine journalists, sommeliers, educators and industry representatives as regular contributors. As a team of champagne lovers and communicators, we are thrilled to share our united passion with wine-loving audiences. To read more about champagne, to subscribe to events in Australia and learn more about opportunities to join us for experiences in champagne, visit vineandbubble.com and register your details.